Hello, hello. I see someone else has signed on. Welcome to the warm-up of the how to select and choose orchids. I've redone the orchid presentation with lots of really good information. So we have 10 minutes. So thanks for signing on early. I hope you got the link to the handout, and the handout is just all of the notes that are in the PowerPoint. So it saves you from having to take as many notes and copy the screen. So you can print it up or just open it on the other side of your screen and follow along. What I'm going to do is give the presentation. And our marketing team wanted me to shorten my lectures. And so I'm focusing on the different varieties of orchids, how to select which are the best ones to grow in your home. And then in February, we're doing another lecture on the care of orchids. Now, I included all the information on the care, the best fertilizers, the best insecticides, the best potting mixes. It's in the outline. So you're kind of getting a bonus, and I'm going to fly through those slides at the end, but we're really going to focus on the different varieties, and we've got such beautiful ones here. Really want you to brave the cold and come and see. We brought in 4,000 tropical foliage plants for a big promotion that we're having. Anytime you spend more than $75 or more, you get $25 right off the top. So it's a neat way to increase your plant collection, and it's good for plants and containers, fertilizers, potting mixes, insecticides, all the things you need to make your plants happy and healthy. I just noticed someone else logged on. Welcome, welcome. I'm just talking and killing time before we start the lecture at noon. And this lecture is on how to select orchids and the best ones, how to choose the best ones for the home growing environment. The photo that is on the screen right now was taken in the greenhouse of my good friend and mentor, Herman Pagors. This was when he had his greenhouse open. This is what it looked like. It was spectacular. He did phenomenal tissue culture with orchids, did some really excellent hybridizing, and was considered one of the, he still is considered one of the top people in the orchid world. He's in his 80s, and doggone COVID, he'd be here during the lecture if we didn't have COVID. So many of you may have seen him here doing lectures in the Education Center. He was always here in February. I see the numbers ticking up. We've got four people signed on right now. I'm Jennifer Brennan. I'm the Horticulture Information Specialist here at Chalet. I've been here 30 years. Oh my gosh, it's almost 31 now. Woo! Uh-oh. What is this? Apple giving me messages on my computer. I don't need that. Let me see, where are we now? Okay, we have 5 people signed on, and that includes me. So 4 people. Hello, 4. We have beautiful orchids. We got many unusual ones that we usually don't carry, and they're in the greenhouse right now. So you need to brave the cold after this. Come in and the promotion on purchasing plants is good through the end of the month, and it actually works on the orchids too. So if you spend more than $75 or $75 or more, you get $25 off the top. which is really fun. And that applies to plants, pots, containers, decorative containers, potting mixes, fertilizers, insecticides, fungicides, anything to take care of plants. So it's a great value. We still have 7 minutes, and everyone, I believe it was a double email. Carly sent the link to the webinar, this PowerPoint webinar, the Zoom webinar, and then she also sent a link. I think they were connected, that had the handout, and these are all the notes that you'll be seeing on the PowerPoint, or in the PowerPoint presentation. And you can print it or open it on the other side of your screen. Some people are really good at that. I'm old school. I print everything. I like to have it in my hand. It sticks in my brain better. What I'm going to do is give the presentation, focusing on the different varieties and how to select the orchids that are going to be best for your home growing environment. And then they wanted me to split my presentation into 2. So in February, there'll be another orchid presentation on how to care for the orchids, how to repot them, how to prune them, things like that. I have those notes in this handout, and I'm going to just kind of give you a teaser of what that's going to involve in February. This presentation is to teach you about the different varieties of the orchids and the different hybrids, and so you know how to pick the best one for your growing environment in your home. The numbers are ticking up there. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to do the presentation. You may put your questions in the question and answer segment of the webinar, and I'll stay as long as it takes to answer them. And it's easier if you do it in the question and answer column rather than the chat. It's easier to keep them organized. So I appreciate that you use that. This photo on the screen, the title page of the PowerPoint, was a photo from Shady Oaks Nursery, which was the nursery that Herman Pagors owned for many, many years until he retired. And it was so much fun to go out to his greenhouses, because he not only grew orchids, he tissue cultured them, hybridized them, but he also had just phenomenal tropical foliage plants too. It was fun. Okay, it's 4 minutes till. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jennifer Brennan. I'm the Horticulture Information Specialist here at Chalet, and I've been here 30 years. 30 years. Ooh. I joke, I work with Tracy Butler, and we've worked that long together. And I joke with her that she was 6 when we got started, and I was 8. Oh, the numbers are ticking up as we get closer to the start. Welcome, welcome, everybody. This is going to be the how to select orchids or choosing orchids. So I'm going to show you the different varieties, what to look for in an orchid, and then how to take care of any of those. And the care is that helps you decide which is the type of orchid that will work best in your home growing environment. Orchids are much tougher than people give them credit for. For many, many years, many of us thought they were just so tender and so difficult to grow. They are not. They're toughies. They're tough plants. They can survive a lot. And I know that from doing the repotting workshops for orchids. You should have seen some of the plants that would come in, and we'd bring them back. They were close to death, and we'd bring them back every time. So I have someone with a raised hand. I don't know what that means, if that's in the chat box or the Q&A box. Let me check here. Huh, it's not in the chat box. Let me check again. That's a new one. Just when I thought I knew everything about this Zoom thing, I had to notice that a phone number had their hand raised. If you could, person who has their hand raised, go to the chat box or go to the Q&A and type in your question. We have 18 people, and it is now noon. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jennifer Brennan. I'm the horticulture information specialist here at Chalet. I have been here 30 years. And the presentation today is on selecting orchids. And boy, we got a beautiful shipment of orchids in the last 2 weeks. We have tons of the Phalaenopsis, the moth orchids, like what's on the screen here. And then we've got some incredible, more unusual varieties and rare varieties that I'm going to go over and show you the photos of what are here. They're in the first greenhouse here, and we have the greenhouse number 1 and greenhouse number 2. Number 2 is the one that has most of the foliage plants in it, and but they look gorgeous. So venture out in this cold. At least it's sunny. When it's this cold, you don't get a lot of spray on your car. So venture out, come and check our greenhouses. The other thing that is really wonderful right now is we brought in 4,000 tropical foliage plants and are doing a promotion until the end of the month. And if you spend $75 or more, and that's on plants, pots, containers, fertilizer, potting mixes, and that's orchid mix and or houseplant mixes, insecticides, any of those products that go with plants, you get $25 right off the top of the purchase. So it's a great promotion all the way through the end of the month. So I was mentioning, and it looks like we got our numbers really popped up. I'm just checking one more time here to see before I move on. We have 28 people. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So this is on how to select orchids. And I'm going to answer the questions at the end of the presentation. There was a handout that has all of the information on the PowerPoint pages. So you can print that up or just save that to your computer and follow along. So you don't have to break your arm taking notes, with this. Let's go ahead and get started. Oh, I hit the wrong thing. Don't you love that? There we go. Okay. Now, the most common genera of orchids that we can have success with, growing in our homes are the Phalaenopsis, the Cattleyas, the Oncidiums, the Dendrobiums, the Vandas, and the Cymbidiums. Now, although these plants are all in the orchid family, they really vary greatly in their physical and floral, morphology or shape. And here I'm doing the wrong thing. Here we go. Now, I always thank my mentor, Herman Pagors, for my knowledge, my enhanced knowledge and love of orchids. I've known Herman for probably 25 years, and he's used to speak here at the Learning Center all the time, or the Education Center. And I'm going to have him back. This was him. These are photos of him in his tissue culture lab that it always had to be sterile. So I was never allowed to go in, but so he would let me look in and take a photo of him. And he was always peeking out whenever I would come to visit him. Okay. Now, he put this list together, and these are the most important genera or genuses that for you to know, and he did this in the order of ease for home care. So the number 1 is the easiest, and the most difficult is number 9. So Phalaenopsis, also called the moth orchids, the lady slipper orchids are the Paphiopedilums. Dendrobium Phalaenopsis are also known as denfall. The Oncidiums are the dancing lady orchids. The epinendrum, I thought I took that one off because that's a pretty difficult one. Miltonias and the brassias, those are considered the pansy orchids. The cattleyas are the classic corsage orchids that we all used to wear corsages. Cymbidiums and the Dendrobium Nobile types. Cymbidiums are also called the boat orchids because the flowers look like boats. And then the nobiles are the noble Dendrobium orchid. And then there's the common name for vandas are just vanda orchids. I'm going to show you about this. Okay, so orchids they're incredibly unique, and it's just a fascinating group of plants. Most people and many people can identify the moth orchid or the Phalaenopsis, and most will recognize the cattleya. And the moth orchid is the top photo on this screen, and then the cattleya, the corsage orchid, is a beautiful variety. Is the lower photo. But the question often asked is, what makes an orchid an orchid? Orchids have some real physical traits or morphological traits that make them stand out from other plant families. And many of their floral parts come in groups of 3. So on this photo or this diagram, the orchid flower shows you, pardon me, getting my water here. There are 2 sets of 3 parts. The sepal those are the outer coverings on a bud. When you're looking, so you can see the flower and then you see the bud next to it. The outer coverings are the sepals, and there's 3. And when you look at this photo, there's a sepal, with the tag here. This is a sepal down here, and this is a sepal right here. Then on the inside, as those are opening up, then you have petals. And with most orchids, they're also a set of 3 petals. Now, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Here's a petal right here. That's one petal. Here's the other petal, and then the third petal is this modified part where all the flowering parts are. And when I say flowering parts, these are the parts that get pollinated. These are the male and female parts of the sexual organs of the flower, and the third petal is usually the bottommost petal, which would be this one right here, It's been specialized into a lip, or the horticultural term for that is labellum, and it's what attracts all the pollinators to the reproductive organs in the flower. And now in orchids, the reproductive organ is known as the column. So you can see this arrow showing the column right here. And it contains both the male part that has the pollen, and the pollen is tucked under this part right here, and then the female part, which gets pollinated. Okay, now another very unique morphology for most orchids are the leaves. Most leaves are very waxy, very leathery, because all of the parts of an orchid are designed to hold water and save water. So again, many of the leaves that we have in cultivar are specifically designed to conserve water. They hold it. So you'll look at very waxy leaves, leathery leaves. And this is true for most of the orchids that we deal with. They have specialized stomates, or stomata is the plural form of that. Those are the openings in the leaves that allow the leaf to breathe. It's where the carbon dioxide is pulled in and the oxygen is released. And again, they're very specialized to help prevent the water loss during transpiration, which is the lack of the, it's the act of breathing by the plant. And orchids are pretty cool because they utilize a CAM photosynthesis, which means they collect materials during the day. So they save sunlight and convert that energy in the daylight, and they store the water in their tissues, and then they also bring the carbon dioxide in during the daytime, and then they process them at night. So that's why orchids are really good to keep in a bedroom, if you have the right light during the daytime, because they're releasing oxygen as they're metabolizing all night long. So it's a fun thing. Now you can see the root on the top photo. This is a Phalaenopsis, and you can see the roots growing out of the plant, growing down into the bark mix. And then this is a Dendrobium. Excuse me, no, this is an Oncidium in the bottom picture, and you can see the pseudobulb, which is a small bulb formation. The leaves are attached to the top of it, and that stores energy and also water to help the plant survive in the conditions that they're in. Now, the details of the orchid stems and roots. The stems are specialized into what I described as a pseudobulb, and they're basically expanded stems that allow the plants to store carbohydrates, food, excess water, and excess food. Now, the roots of the tree-dwelling types of orchids, which are called epiphytic, have a special layer. The outer layer they're actually dead cells called velamen, and you can see them on these roots that are growing out of the plant into the top of that potting mix. And because orchids metabolize very slowly, they do that to outpace their resources. They live, and the epiphytes live up in the branches of trees, so the water just flows right over them very, very quickly. So the roots need to absorb slowly. So what happens is that velamen absorbs water as it's flowing by, and then allows the roots to soak it up more slowly at a slower pace. Now, what's really cool is that, the outer layer is kind of a white looking color, silvery white, and then when it gets wet, you can see through it and see the green photosynthesizing roots. So a lot of times you'll see, when you're working with the roots, sometimes they look very green. And so when a plant needs to be repotted, we remove all of the potting mix. That needs to be done usually every 1 to 2 years, because the bark mix, and or if it's in sphagnum moss, will break down. It decomposes, and when it decomposes, it can cause that velamen to decompose too and damage the roots. So it needs to be replaced and replenished and refreshed every 1 to 2 years. But you never want to do it when they're in bloom. Okay. Now, many orchids grow in trees. They're epiphytic, and these are examples of and photos of our favorite orchids that are actually growing out in the wild. The one over on the left is a beautiful moth orchid, Phalaenopsis. The one on the right upper one is one of the Oncidiums, or the dancing ladies. And then the one down below is also a type of Oncidium. And you can see them growing in the trees, and you can see how the roots have just attached to the bark. And as the rain, washes over them in a tropical rainforest, that's how they soak up that water. Now, they're also terrestrial orchids, which means they grow in the ground, in soil. Those are things like the lady slippers. This is a hardy lady slipper over on the right, growing in North Carolina. This is a native in Illinois, and it's Galeris spectabilis, and it's just called the showy orchid. On the bottom photo is the jewel orchid. And these are very popular and very easy to grow. They have white flowers, very small white flowers. The foliage is beautiful. You can see that burgundy with the red and the green stripe in it. So very, very, very nice. Very, very fun ones to use. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about the most populars. The Phalaenopsis, these are the most common orchids in the marketplace, and again, commonly called the moth orchids. They usually have very wide, flat, dark leaves that are arranged opposite of each other, very strap shape, strap shape. And they have long stems of these beautiful flat flowers that can last up to 3 or more months. If you give them the proper watering, the proper sunlight, the proper light, and good fertilizer. Okay, their lip is smaller than the petals. You can see it, the petals are huge. And it's held horizontally right underneath the column. And the column is where you have the pollen and the stigma. Okay, summary, they grow warm. That's why they're so popular in our homes. Warm for a plant is 72 degrees. And what's our room temperature? 72 degrees. They'll do well with medium light. So that means if you have an east window where the morning sun comes in and can shine on the plant, that's ideal. You can also get by with them in south and west windows if you move them away from the window. For every 6 inches, this is 6 inches from here to here, for every 6 inches you move a plant away from a window, it reduces the intensity of the light by half. So, so much. They grow best in a bark mix, a chunk bark mix. You'll see a lot of them growing in sphagnum moss. It's easy to ship them that way from, where they're mass produced. But as soon as they've stopped flowering, we always advise here at Chalet to change the mix to a bark mix, a combination mix. It's used chunk bark. It can have a little bit of sphagnum moss mixed in, horticultural charcoal, and perlite. That is the ideal mix. And again, you want to do this annually for the Phalaenopsis. They actually do the best in plastic pots in our home environment because it helps hold the moisture around the roots more efficiently. So, and the ideal best time to repot them is September. That's usually when they finished blooming, and they can bloom that long. They'll start blooming in January and then stay in bloom all the way till the end of August, and then it's time to repot in September. Okay, I love this. This cultivar that's at the top is one of the ones that Herman Pagor's actually hybridized. Now, Cattleya was once the king of the orchid world, and it was known for its use in corsages. We have lots and lots of growers in this area that produced corsage orchids for the florist trade. They're generally large. The flowers are up to 8 inches across. So this is 6. So, I mean, they're this big. They're just spectacular. They're ruffled. They have the ruffled edges like this sample. And they're fragrant. The fragrance is just lovely. They have very thin pseudobulbs and very hard, waxy leaves. You can see how firm those leaves are. They usually have large, the lip petal is very large and dropping down in the front. And it usually has a contrasting color right in the center of the column. And that helps the insects find their way in to pollinate them. To summarize, now you're going to see this Cattleya, BC, LC, SLC, POT, SC. There's orchids can breed with each other. And so there's so many crosses that to put the name, the name and write it all out on a tag, it takes too much space. So the B is like Brassavocattleya. The L is Laleocattleya. And I'm going to show you, and I'll come back. This is the abbreviation chart, and you can see on here that the B means the Brassavola, the C is Cattleya, the L is Lalea. All of these are different genus or genera of orchids. So when you go back, you can see these are all, the cattleyas are all listed like, like that. You'll see, they're all considered cattleyas. Okay, they like intermediate temperatures, which means they need to be, in between. They like cooler night temperatures when they're getting ready to set flowers, and that's usually in the fall. And so cooler night temperatures than room temperature. So in the 60s, they like bright light, prefer plastic pots to maintain their moisture ratio. They should be repotted at least every 2 years, biennial repotting. They really do well growing outdoors in our shaded landscapes from May 15th to September 15th. That gives them that exposure to cooler nights in September, and will really set the flower bud, the flowering process. Okay. Now, we'll choose on here. This shows the pseudobulbs on the cattleyas, and they're long and skinny. And then note how the flowering portion is on the front. On the newer pseudobulbs, the older pseudobulbs are at the back edge of the pot. Whenever you repot them, you put the older ones at close to the back, and then give it room for the young ones to grow across the top of the pot and move forward. When you're dividing a cattleya, you want to make sure that you at least have 3 of those pseudobulbs. And you could actually divide this one up into probably 3 different plants, and just propagate going on and on and on. But it's an important thing to understand. It's a rhizome growth that will grow across the top of the pot. Now, this is an Oncidium, and you say, wait a minute, this is Oncidisa, and this is one called Sweet Sugar Lemon Drop. And that again is one of those combination names because it was a hybrid, but it's still considered the Oncidiums. And Oncidiums, it's probably more accurate to call them, they call it the Oncidium Alliance. They're a group of plants that are from South America, and they actually span a really wide range of habitats. Inside the Oncidium Alliance, there's many genera that hybridize freely, and they create some just beautiful intergeneric hybrids. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but they're usually characterized by large quantities of small to medium flowers that are borne on a branch stem that generally forms kind of a Christmas tree shape. Because it's pointed at the top and wider at the bottom. But most of the commonly identified Oncidium are the yellow dancing lady types, and this is a perfect example of them. Okay. This is a summary. Look at all the different colors from the different hybrids. They like intermediate to warm, which means temperatures down in the 60s at night to 70s during the day, medium to bright light, and again, repot every 2 years in either clay or plastic. Either of them is fine. Okay. Now the dendrobiums, this one is called Verona Glow. That's a beautiful purple. It is a massive genus containing more, and this is conservative, more than 900 species of plants. And they ran from cool growing miniatures, huge specimen plants growing in very hot conditions year round. They're the most commonly found types of dendrobiums are the Phalaenopsis type, and they're commonly known as Dendrobium Phalaenopsis, so the Denphal types. And again, it's named for the species that was most used in their breeding, which used to be known as Dendrobium Phalaenopsis, but now it's known as Dendrobium, and I have to say this one, it's Begibum. And okay, and then there's also the Nobile type, which is named for the species that is also used in their breeding, and this is Dendrobium Nobile, and I'll talk about those next. The Denphal type warm growing year round, and because of that, they do really well, in our homes. They bear flowers that are similar in appearance to the Phalaenopsis flowers. They're not exactly the same, but that confuses some people. Now, the denthals have a spur at the back of the lip, and you can see the spur on this photo. See right there, they call that's the spur right there. It's on the back of that, back of the lip. And some are more pronounced than that. And, but they're born on very strong, upright stems that go straight rather than arch. The Phalaenopsis arch, the Dendrobiums go straight. And they can actually rebloom on old canes. So you don't prune those off when you finish. The Phalaenopsis you prune back. I'll show you a photo of that in a few minutes. Okay, now these are the Dendrobium Phalaenopsis as a summary. Here, this is what their cane looks like. And it's a modified, pseudobulb, but it looks more like a straight cane. And that's the photo over here on the left. They're very, very straight with the leaves up and down those stems. Again, the Dendrobium, the denthals are warm types. They like bright light, south window or west window, and small pots. This is the one thing that was one of the hardest things for me to learn, but Herman always, he said, when in doubt, always plant them in a smaller pot than you would think that they would be happy in. If you plant them in too large a pot, then the roots will get damaged and the plant could die. So, and again, these also need repotting every 2 years, a biennial repotting. Now, the nobile types, or the noble, they grow warm in the summer, but they require a cool winter period to induce the flowering. So they need to experience temperatures in the 40s to low 50s, preferably low 50s, in order to flower well. They're distinguished by bearing fuzzy, flat, rounded. They're more rounded flowers. See how they have a more round shape? Very colorful, that are attached close to the stem, all up and down that cane. And when you have a well-flowered plant, they cover the whole stem, up and down and up and down. And you can see down in the left what the leaves look like on those stems. Okay, now the Cymbidiums. The Cymbidium, this is one. It's the Izan forest, and it's Majolica, and they have tall stems, and they have many flowers that have a more typical orchid shape. The petals are all distinct from each other, with more of a trumpet lip in the front. They have grassy leaves, and they readily form very large clumps. They're the most common cool flowering types, and they need to experience cooler winter nights in the 40s, and you want to expose them to that in the fall, and that's what initiates their flowering. So these can be a little difficult for home growers, because it's difficult to get them that cooling treatment. Once those flowers open, they can last for up to 2 months, or even more if you keep them cool, in a cool environment. They're very, very showy, rewarding plants, and you can have them in a 6-inch pot, and a 6-inch pot size plant can have at least 3 stems, and with 15 or more flowers on each stem. This is a gorgeous one. Oh, and then this one is called Majolica. Now, lumping the Cymbidiums and the Dendrobium Nobile types together is because they like those cool nights in the 50s, 53 nights, in order to initiate flowering. And again, sometimes that's difficult for a standard homeowner to do, and they flower. They require biennial repotting every 2 years to every 3 years in plastic pots, because they like to dry out as much. They're heavy feeders. Both of these are, And again, they like a very bright light. You can see the foliage of the Dendrobium Nobile over on the left, and then the foliage of the Cymbidium on the middle picture in the right, and then that's a flower of the Cymbidium on the far right. Now vandas are beautiful, but they're difficult for us to grow in our homes. They're a genus of hot growing orchids, mainly from Southeast Asia. And they have strap-shaped leaves, which are real thick and leathery. And they're generally grown in a hanging basket without any medium at all. So they need to be in a very, very, very humid environment. And they come in a variety of colors. They're more reds, and then it's the one true blue that you can find in the orchid world. And they're absolutely bright, just beautifully bright and vibrant, and very, very showy. So the vandas and the ascosendas are kind of grouped together. And a lot of times, see right in the middle of that slide, you see that wood basket, and the roots are just growing out of it. The basket just holds it. And these are great in very humid areas. You see these, they're very popular down in Florida, and they do beautifully down there where the humidity is just constantly high. They're heavy feeders, so you need to fertilize these every time you water them, and they do need bright light. Okay, and then look at this collection of them in that photo down in the bottom one. They're just incredible colors. Okay, now I slipped in the lady slipper because everyone loves the lady slippers. This is the Paphiopedilums, and there are warm ones, warm loving ones, and cool loving ones. And you know, they get by on lower light because they're used to living down in the soil in the bottom of a forest or the bottom of a rainforest. So as a result, you keep them in plastic pots to help keep the moisture around them. They need to be repotted annually, and they're light feeders. Now, whenever you see the speckled foliage, like the photo in the center of the screen, those are more tropical ones and warm loving ones, and the ones that have the greener foliage are more of the temperate ones that live in our forest areas. Now, I threw the Miltonias, the Brassia, Ontoglossums, and because you'll see them, we bring the Miltonias in when they're in bloom. They're called the pansy orchids. They're just gorgeous, but they're very difficult to get to rebloom. The Brassias are also called the spider orchids, and you can see how they look like they have long spider legs. And again, intermediate to cool growing, and especially to initiate the flowering again. They like it part shady. These types are great in an east window. They can get by in a north window too. And again, annual and or biennial repotting in plastic pots. Okay, and again, less fertilizer. Now, the orchid family, it's incredibly large, and it's so diverse. It is so diverse. You know, to try to do it justice with just one lecture like this. This is why I loved Herman. I love Herman so much, is that he makes it so easy for us to pick ones that we will have success with. And what's amazing is that there are more than 25,000 different species, more than 150,000 registered hybrids. But the variation within each species is so significant, let alone the entire orchid family. I was first exposed to orchids when I was an intern at Longwood Gardens, and their orchid collections are just spectacular. And they have them in bloom all seasons of the year. And so they're always moving their displays in and out of their production areas, because something was always new in bloom each month. And so the reason we're doing this is to help you to have a little practice and knowledge and observation. We can let people learn to identify most of the common types of the orchids. Okay, now this is was a chart from Herman, and he classified that there were 30,000 species and varieties around the world in calamities. And again, epiphytic and terrestrial. They're rhizomatous. That means they have a rhizome, and it's a monopodial growth habit. It grows along one stem and it grows across. It would grow across this conference table that I'm sitting at if you left them for 5 years, and the conditions were great. The plant structure they have leaves, they have the pseudobulbs, they have that rhizome, they have the roots, they have the flower stems, and then tons and tons of resting eyes on all the stems and all of the pseudobulbs. The roots can be air roots and or conventional roots in a medium, and they're used to anchor a plant. They're used to breathe for the plant. They take in moisture. They store food, and a lot of them. The function is on both on some of the same varieties, like the Paphiopedilums and the Phalaenopsis. The leaves and the roots store energy for the whole plant. Now they all use photosynthesis. They're all triggered by the day length, which is known as photoperiodism. So as the days get longer, as the days get shorter, that's what triggers them to go into bloom. No, excuse me. As the days get longer and longer and longer, that's what triggers the Phalaenopsis. So as our days get longer in the summer, it will trigger them. Then they rest, and then they go back into bloom again. Okay, and all right, let's keep moving. Now this is how our orchids come in from our supplier. And so when they called me and said, or the unusual and rare orchids, and this is what they look like when I ran back to our receiving area. And then here's what they look like on display. So these are on tables in both of our greenhouses, the front greenhouse, greenhouse 1 and greenhouse 2. And I'm going to go over all these different varieties. This is a Cattleya. This is called White Lightning. Bob Betts was the hybridizer. When you look at the names, you'll see those codes. And this one is on display in our greenhouse right now. Spectacular, absolutely spectacular. Okay, this is Alalia Cattleya, and this is called Betty Ford York, and beautiful dark lavender, okay. Oh, let me go back. See the pseudobulb on this one? These are huge. The Cattleyas can be huge orchids. This is a huge one. Okay. And then this is a Brachyolelio Cattleya, and this was the hybridizer, Chungu Chafinch, and this is called Sunset Blaze. Isn't that spectacular? The colors and the fragrance, just amazing, absolutely amazing. This one is a fun, it's a Vanda cross, and this is called White Foxtail. Great name for it, isn't it? And this is really fragrant. I think we only got one of these. So this is kind of mean to tease you with this one. Okay, these are Dendrobium Nobile. And when I was talking about, you can see how the buds are coming out lower on the stems, close to the pot over on the right. And then it started blooming at the top, and then the buds are opening up all the way down. And when you have a really well done Nobile Dendrobium, it just covers, the flowers just cover the stem all the way up and down. This one is this is a Dendrobium, and a type of Dendrobium. This is called Purple Rain. And the olives, I should get my code page back up to show you all of the hybrids that were involved. And then this is the code of the hybridizer's name, SHLVUML. Okay, Royal Chip, beautiful, small little orchid. This is in a 4-inch pot. It's only about, I would say, 8 to 10 inches tall, with that great big, the great big leaf. And then you can see the cane. The canes on Dendrobiums always look kind of like they need to be watered, but that's just how they look. And this look how it looks like chips, like chocolate chips all through, all through that. And this was the first spike that opened low, and you can see there's another set of buds that is going to be opening up later on. This is a lady slipper. This is called Kimura Stone. And this was just half opened as of yesterday. I took this yesterday, and you can see how it has, it looks like a lady's slipper where the woman's foot would fit into the the lip that, and then the petals come out opening on the top. And it's, what's beautiful is it's like a green and white stripe on the lower petals. This is a beautiful, and okay, what's interesting about this is this variety, there's controversy about whether this is a dendrobium or not. So that they won't put they'll just say nodosa, which is the species, and they won't put that on. And then this one was a cross between Ramar and Mas Mayor. And I love this very, very, very modified petals and sepals and the lip on this one. Also fragrant, also fragrant. This one, we actually got 6 of these dendrobiums, and you can see all the details on the bottom of the screen about how it was hybridized and the cross. And this is called Paul's Pride. The company was Pacific Waters, you know, that did this one. And look how gorgeous this is. And that spike, you know, the tip opens first, and then it keeps opening all the way down the spike. Okay, now these are notes that I'm sharing from Herman, and he always talked about how to grow orchids to bloom abundantly. And so you need to create the ideal growing climate that would match what their native location is. So you want to give them the ideal temperatures for the various genera. Warm is 65 or above, and that's the minimum temperature. So Phalaenopsis don't like to be lower than 65 degrees. Intermediate is, minimum is 58, and then the cooler ones, 55 to 50. So after the plants are watered on cloudy days, and this is more so for a greenhouse, you need to raise the minimum 3 to 5 degrees for a night, because the humidity will drop the temperature. Okay, and then I'm just showing you some of the gorgeous photos of the different varieties. And when you want the orchids to bloom abundantly, you must give it the best light. Light is the most critical factor, and you know, you can grow the plant towards a winning ribbon. You can scorch it, or you know, it can flower continuously in the case of some varieties. So young plants need less light, you know, as well as large leaf plants. They don't need as much light because they have more surface. They have more surface area on the leaves to absorb the light that's there. So while mature plants and sturdy types need more intense light, shading the orchids from direct sun is essential. You just don't want to get them sunburnt. So, but that's more so in a greenhouse. You know, a sheer or patterned curtain is required in a south window, you know, or, you know, more so in the summer than the winter, because the sun is too high in the summertime to hurt them. Okay, artificial light is used by many orchid growers in combination with the outdoor growing to extend the day length when we have the short days. And a 40 watt to 1,000 watt lights are used. Now the neat thing is the LED lights are the newest lights, and they're excellent. And you can get them with with a horticultural range, so it includes all of the red light plus all the blue light, the whole full spectrum of light. Okay, and most often you want to adjust the day length to a standard daylight and add 1 hour of extra light. And then this is just an example of one of the orchids in his greenhouse. The other thing that's really important to have good blooming orchids is humidity. So if you can group your plants together. You can use humidity trays. I like to use just a humidifier to really improve it. Now, air movement and air exchange is beneficial when you're growing plants in greenhouses, but in the home, fans can often be more detrimental, and our forced air heating can really reduce the humidity. So you want to again be aware of the humidity, check it and monitor it, and if you need to increase it, do that with a room humidifier or humidity trays that you're sitting the plants on. When you need to shade the orchids from direct south sun, it's usually essential from February through October, and a sheer curtain in a window or they're good ways to protect the plants. Okay. This is damage on an Oncidium that I own from letting the plant get too dry in between waterings. So you can see how there was an accordion shape on the leaf because it couldn't expand because it didn't have enough water. It got too dry in between waterings. Okay. Now the special efforts to get stubborn plants to bloom, you want to give them more light, give them cooler nights, use low nitrogen food, or you could do no food at all. I'd rather see you just use low nitrogen food. Keep them more dry during the winter months, give them more space, which means to repot them, and divide crowded bushy plants to become rejuvenated into stronger new growth plants. Okay, now I'm just going to flash through this because I wasn't going to go into all of this, but insect control, we have the rose and flower systemic, and you can use that indoors or outdoors. You can use the tomato and vegetable fertilizer. Or also 8 is another one that we have now. It's sulfur and organically derived pyrethrin. Okay, and fertilizing any orchids that are growing in fir bark, you have to fertilize. And my favorite to recommend, and the chalet favorite, is the Dynagrow Orchid Pro. It's a 786 plus an 11 to 12 micronutrients. You can also just use the Dynagrow Grow fertilizer, which is 795. And you use that at a half a teaspoon per gallon each week when you water. And you want to water the plants once a week. And you take them to the sink, water, let them drain, water, let them drain, do that twice, and then give them the fertilizer. Okay. This is a photo of, this is the Better Grow, Better Bloom. That's a granular form. Grow is the 795, and Orchid Pro is the 786. Either of those are my favorites to recommend. And then Jack's Classic is also really good. It's a liquid also. And then I'm just going to point out, after the flowers have bloomed and all the flowers have fallen off the flowering stalk, you want to trim it to 1/3 the length. And if the stem is still green, leave that. When it goes into the bloom cycle again the next time, sometimes it will actually produce another bloom stalk off a healthy flowering stem. Now, if the plant, the flowering spike has turned brown, cut it off. See where the arrow is at the bottom, right here. Cut it off right above where it's attached to the leaves. Repotting. Okay, you need to do this, and I'm going to skip through this. You want to do this every 1 to 2 years. And orchids are the only plant that you should remove all of the planting medium. And my favorite is this Phalaenopsis bag one over here, because it has the sphagnum moss plus the chunk fir bark, plus horticultural charcoal, plus the perlite, which is the white. And if you don't want as large a bag, you can go with just the special orchid mix. That's just the bark, charcoal, and the perlite. And then we just have plain bark if you want to mix your own. And then propagation from babies or kikis, you want to wait till the plant has 3 to 4 leaves on it, and that wait for the roots until the roots are at least 4 inches long. Then you just remove it from. This is a baby plant that formed from a flowering spike, and that's a neat way to propagate. I'm going to go into more details on that. Now, these are some stars from the orchid repotting workshops. For many years, I had the repotting workshops once a month up in the Learning Center, but then COVID kind of made us stop doing that. These are some of the stars that came back after being repotted, and look how good they look. Now, because we're not doing the in-person workshops, we did a video, and oh look, it's me. And you can go to YouTube or go to the Chalet webpage and click on the YouTube setting at the upper corner, and then type in Chalet Repotting Orchids. This is the link if you just want to copy this off of the notes, and then put that on the search line. Click on it, and I walk you through, show you how to repot, and you can watch it work along with it or go back and use it as a reference. So that people really have enjoyed that. And now, okay, we're 10 minutes before 1. Oh my gosh, it is 1. And so I promised to answer questions. So let's do this. I'm going to stop the share. Stop the share. There we go. Okay. And then here's the questions. Okay. What time of year is best for repotting? Sue Garsman, that is an excellent question. The best time is any time the plant's not blooming. So if you do repot when a plant's blooming, the nutrients that that are used for the flowers are sucked away by the roots growing, and then it will cause the flowers to abort. So I say the best time, it's usually from July through the end of September is the best time to repot most of the orchids. Okay, Karen Lustig, can you send a copy of the chart of abbreviations and the corresponding terms you showed during this talk? Yeah, I would be glad to. Karen, I'm sure you're in our system, and I'll just get your email from your Chalet Rewards account, and I'll email that to you. I'll make a note. I'll make a note on my notes here, and then let me see, Hillary. What does it mean when the leaves start turning droopy and rubbery? Okay, that means that the plant is not getting enough water. You know, it hasn't been watered enough, or it also means that the roots are damaged because it's been in too wet a situation. And when the roots get damaged, and you remember seeing the slide of the velamen, which was that kind of white coating. If it gets damaged, then the root dies. And if it's kept in too wet an environment, it will kill the roots. And so if there's no roots, the plant can't take up any moisture, and so the leaves get droopy or flaccid. Okay, now okay, Joan, here's a question from Joan. If you have a plant that has damage from drying out, should remove those leaves? First of all, Joan, that's a great question. First of all, I would try watering it and getting it to rehydrate. Now, it's not like a lot of our herbaceous plants that are very have very kind of flimsy leaves. You need to water probably 3 different times for the leaves to recover. So so water a couple of times, then see how they recover. If they haven't become turgid, after 2 or 3 times the water, then and then the other thing is repot it first. Repot it, and then do the watering. I would water a couple times first, then repot it. Okay. Okay. Do you recommend watering with ice cubes? No, no, no. And there's a company out of Ohio. They work with the florist trade. It's very helpful with the florist trade because there's usually beautiful combination planters, and they're in a vase that goes on a very expensive table, and there's no way you want any water to leak out. And so that's how that industry started. Unfortunately, you can see how roots are burned from ice cubes sitting on top of roots. If you are going to use the ice cube method, try to make sure that it's just sitting on the medium, the bark or the sphagnum moss, and not ever sitting on the roots. So when I talked to Herman about that, he said, "Oh my gosh, that's poppycock. I'd never," and because orchids have never seen ice cubes ever in the tropical rainforest. So I really, I'm undoing a lot of that damage, with most customers. Okay, now, do you cut off old dried up pseudobulbs? Okay, except for the epiphytes, which planting method do you use for which type of orchids? Okay, this is Charlton Drake. Okay, if the pseudobulbs are completely dried, then yes, you can cut them off. But what's interesting is, if the pseudobulbs, the dried pseudobulbs are still attached to, healthy pseudobulbs, they probably still have dormant eyes at the base. If there's a root system on it, you keep 3 of, the pseudobulbs together, the oldest and then 2 coming forward, divide that up, and minimum is 3, and then repot it. And you might be really surprised to see how you can propagate that. I learned that just magic from, from Herman. Okay, except for the epiphytes, which planting medium do you use for which type of orchids? Okay, well, I kind of thought that I went over that, and I'm going to go over that in more detail in February. But for the majority of the orchids, for all of them, except for the terrestrial ones, you want to use bark mix. You want to use a chunk bark mix. And that tends to be the healthiest because you get the best oxygenation of the root system in between the waterings. So the majority of them are epiphytes. The only ones that are, the ones that don't require the bark are the terrestrial ones. And those are the lady slippers, the Paphiopedilums, the jewel orchids. Those, terrestrials, kind of pull the terrestrials away. They're easy to learn, and then just keep all the other ones in a bark mold, in a bark medium. Okay, all right, and it looks like, boy, I've kept up. I'm looking to see if there's one chat. Let me check the chat. Here we go. I have to move the Q&A box over here. Okay, in the chat. This is Maureen. I have a moth orchid which no longer reblooms but continues to grow more leaves. Should I cut back the leaves? Oh, no. You need to repot it. When you repot it and give it a healthier root system, give it brighter light, give it a good fertilizer. If you're not fertilizing, then you want to give it a good fertilizer with that higher middle number, the higher phosphorus. And so that's the Orchid Pro from Dynagrow or the Grow from Dynagrow. Those are the best ones. So again, repotting really does a lot for moth orchids and the Phalaenopsis that haven't performed. The other thing though is, you need to give it, bright light. So kind of look to see where you have it growing, see which is going to be better. Okay, I'm going to check back here to see if we have any other fresh questions. I think I've handled all of the questions and answered them all. I still had 32 people stick with me, and so I thank you for that. I don't know if y'all can see this question answer box. I'm going to move it over here. Thank you, everybody. I sure look forward to seeing you in the store. Come in and look at all these gorgeous orchids. You're just, on a day like today where it's so cold, it's just so nice. Thank goodness it's sunshiny. It's so nice to come in here into the chalet and see. We have beautiful, I think we still have about 2,500 of the 4,000 tropical foliage plants in here. And the oxygen levels are great. And then come into the greenhouse. It's just spectacular. So everybody, I love that you, we had so many sign on. And thanks. You, as always, are the best. Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you, Maureen. And thank you, Denise. I appreciate your compliments. And I'll see you next time around. And I'm going to go into more detail. I'm actually going to repot an orchid right in front of you to show you how to do it, show you how to do it. So, okay. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.